Joe Rowling asked me to read this here today. Having seen Dan Radcliffe's screen test, I don't think Chris Columbus could have found a better Harry. I wish Dan, Emma, and Rupert the very best of luck and hope that they have as much fun acting the first year at Hogwarts as I had writing it.
I think I'm a tiny bit like Harry, because I'd like to have an owl.
Staring out at a room full of reporters on his very first day as Harry Potter, blinking at the popping flashbulbs and gamely fending off reporters' questions, there was no doubt about it. Daniel Radcliffe was in for the ride of his life. For 10 years, Daniel has lived the fantasy on the cloistered sets at Leavesden Studios and facing the frenzied excitement of fans from around the world. It's been a strange and wondrous and sometimes even unsettling journey. And the one person who can really identify with Daniel's incredible journey is J.K. Rowling herself, because she's lived it too. In 1990, she began writing her 7-book Harry Potter series with little expectation, and then watched it grow into a phenomenon unprecedented in the world of literature. And now, for the first time on camera, J.K. Rowling and Daniel Radcliffe will share their experiences over a decade of Harry Potter.
How are you?
Not bad at all. Did I just tread on you?
No, not at all. Please have a seat. Excellent. So, this is exciting.
Yes, it is
This
exciting.
is our chance to ask each other
All the things we've asked each other off camera, but now do it in front of the
But
camera.
now do it in front of
Exactly,
camera,
yeah.
absolutely, and I'm going to try and be much more profound and insightful than I ever have been
Go
off
for it.
camera.
I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. So I was, this is my chance where I realised that doing the interviewing is actually not an easy thing to do at all.
That's okay. We can swap. I can interview you in a bit.
Yeah. That would be brilliant. Okay, so I thought to begin at the beginning, how involved were you in the casting process, and how much do I have to thank you for?
Well, you should thank me for everything, Dan, if that's
obviously.
all right. Flowers every day from now on would be most appreciated.
But do you remember working with Chris?
Involved,
Or?
yeah, I was involved, not to the extent that I was sitting in on auditions, but they were keeping me really fully informed. As you know, we found Rupert and Emma, and they were perfect, and that was a done deal, and we still couldn't find you. And the weird thing is, I know you know this story, but Chris Columbus had seen your picture, and he held it up and said to the casting woman, "Find me someone like that." Do you remember? You've heard that story. That was David Copperfield, wasn't it? He was playing the young David Copperfield, which I'd seen and thought was brilliant.
Oh,
Funnily
really?
enough, yeah. It was on one Christmas, and
cheers.
I'd loved it. And all of us are saying, "Yeah, we need someone like that boy." And it didn't seem to occur to any of us that maybe we should go and look for that boy. And then, will you say how you were found?
Well,
'Cause it was just, it was amazing, really.
It was a bizarre kind of moment. Originally, what had happened was that David Heyman, the producer, knew my dad because my dad had been a literary agent, and my dad had worked with David's mum. And so David sort of asked my dad if I would audition, and the original deal that we'd heard was going to be to do 6 films, and it was going to be done in America, and it was all sort of,
It was going to be done in America. No one ever told me that.
Well, obviously, maybe that's why it changed, because you probably put your foot down at some point, or they just went, "Joe won't agree to that."
They know me quite well.
Which was good, to be honest. That would not been good. Because at one point, was there not
There was discussion of moving it.
but it was going to be an animated thing, and it all.
No, I never wanted animated.
No,
definitely. By the time I signed on the dotted line, we knew it was going to be live action.
Yeah.
That was guaranteed.
Great.
That
would have been
I
bizarre.
started to hear that they maybe had someone that they liked, but they couldn't get you.
But I'm not somebody who particularly believes in fate and destiny and all those things, but my parents do. And so the final straw was the fact that I went to the theatre to see a production of Stones in His Pockets, and David Heyman and Steve Clovis, who adapted all but one of the books, happened to be sitting in the row in front.
You believe it?
And I was sat there for the whole time thinking, why is that man keep
staring
looking
at
around
me? This is very creepy.
It was very creepy.
I need to phone someone.
It was very odd. And I remember at the interval, my mum and my dad both looking kind of quite intense about something. But you know, when as a kid, you're aware that you're being purposely kept out of the loop, you know, for your own good kind of thing. And I remember we went up the stairs and out of the theatre and then sort of hid behind a pillar. I seem to remember that it's some absurd notion that David Heyman and Steve Clovis were going to chase after us, you know, grab us.
And make you be a child actor.
And then there was some debate as to whether we would go back in for the second half, but I was really enjoying the play. Yeah, and so we went back in, and then the next day they my mum and dad sort of went, oh, well, maybe it is the gods sort of trying to tell us something, you know.
But there were a lot of strange coincidences. And then they called me and said, we think we've found him. And then the first time I ever saw you was on screen in my sitting room at home.
Really?
They sent me a video of you. And the curious thing is, and I'm like, I don't believe in fate and destiny.
Which is interesting, because it comes up so much in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make your own.
Yeah.
But, so I saw you on that audition tape, and it was, I don't think I've ever really told you that I found incredibly moving.
Oh, thank you so much.
And almost, I mean, it was incredibly moving. At that point, I didn't have a son.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, and I phoned David up, and I said, he's great, he's fantastic. And I did say to David, it was like watching my son on screen. Because after all, Harry feels like this ghostly son that I've had in my life. But, you know, to be honest, you and Rupert and Emma are all too good looking, frankly. You are, you know, the characters were geeky, and you...
Did you know that was going to happen? Did you sort of think they might...
I'm not an idiot. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
I did, particularly when do you know what? It was really lucky I spoke to Emma first on the phone before I met her, because I fell absolutely in love with her. She said to me, I've only ever acted in school drama plays before, and God, oh my God, I'm so nervous, I can't believe I got the part. And then she spoke for like 60 seconds at least without drawing breath, and I just said, Emma, you're perfect. And then when I met her, and she was this very beautiful, which she still is, of course, beautiful girl, I just kind of had to go, okay, it's film, you know, deal with it. I'm going to still see my gawky, geeky, ugly duckling Hermione in my mind, but...
Do you think that in a way we shot ourselves in the foot with things like that for then Emma's reveal in the fourth film, where she comes downstairs and there is supposed to have been this transformation?
Well, exactly.
Because we're all looking going, well, she was already a beautiful girl.
Yeah, big deal. Now she's a beautiful girl in a beautiful dress.
Yes.
And putting her in Fair Isle sweaters in the first film didn't make her ugly. Not that Hermione in the books is ever ugly, but it was quite a big deal for me that I had written, you know, a strong female character who was primarily about brain, and that she chose to become a little more groomed and glamorous as you know, us geeks do at a certain point in our lives. But I accepted it. Emma's a great actress, and I loved her as a person. And I felt there were so many connections between her and Hermione that did it matter that she was beautiful? Come on.
And I think what I'd say is that I think, you know, in terms of our mentality, we do all have. I mean, I particularly have a very geeky, a kind of obsessive mentality about stuff.
These are my people.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Geeky obsessives are my people.
But it was interesting you mentioned about that audition, because I was given a copy of my audition where I was... it turns out, because neither me, Rupert and Emma could remember this, but it turns out we did all audition together once. There was a screen test
I didn't know that.
where they all tested us all at the same time. And I could hear Chris Columbus's voice off camera.
Hello, it's the German Harry. Time to leave. Be gone from the library, now. Cut! Great work, guys.
And I just remembered, God, he was brilliant. He was amazing with us. Like, I don't think anybody else could have got the enthusiasm out of those...
He's just the nicest guy in the world, isn't he?
Nicest guy in the world.
And a real family man.
Oh,
I remember meeting him and being... I don't know, where is not the right word, but obviously this is the person who's going to be taking my baby. And same way I felt when I met Steve Clovis, whom I absolutely adore as well. But, you know, first time you meet these people, and he was just such a nice guy. And the relief, both that my book would be in safe hands, but to be honestly, that you were all going to be in safe hands as well.
In England, it's different than in America. In America, they treat you first and foremost as a star and then as a child, whereas actually you should be treated as a kid first and then an actor second. But with the auditions, what I found interesting about watching them again was the fact that I was not the best actor of the three by any margin. I mean, Emma and Rupert were a good deal better than me, but there was just something that, I was standing there in admiration of the 11-year-old me, because I was like, because I must,
You should
been
be.
nervous, and I was sort of looking, going, I did really well in that,
Exactly.
just because I was very easy and kind of natural, and I didn't look like I was going to be phased, I suppose, when I was on set.
Do you think you had any idea that young of what you were really taking on? Do you?
Not really, because I wasn't even then fully aware of the scale of the phenomena at all. I mean, I'd had the first two read to me by my dad, who incidentally did a great basilisk voice.
Did he?
Yeah, fantastic back in the day. I did actually at one point.
I can actually imagine your dad doing that.
Yeah, my dad, I did actually suggest it to Chris Columbus, which my dad was completely mortified by. But no,
sweet.
No, I don't think I could have ever had any, and even now, I don't actually think I have an understanding of how far it reaches, because it is a case of not being able to see the wood for the trees. You know, I'm so much in the middle of it that I actually can't see how far out it stretches.
I had exactly the same experience, although I think for a while I deliberately kept myself insulated from it. I didn't want to think about it. And when people would give me statistics, so many books sold or so many territories covered, and you just think, I just want it to be me and my desk. I don't... And again, people will watch and think, oh, come on, you could see the royalty checks coming in. I'm sure you noticed this.
Yes.
And absolutely, I knew it was. But there was a scariness and a pressure and sometimes a weirdness about and you know this and I know this, when people are obsessional about something on the outer fringes, you will have, strange things going on that you maybe don't want to focus on too much when you just want to write your book.
As you say, it's you with your desk. I'd rather be in my aircraft hanging outside Leavesden with the rest of the crew.
It's weird. So you couldn't have contemplated, because I can remember the first premiere, and you were shaking. Yeah, you were. Yeah. But I don't think any of us knew what to expect, did we?
Right. I don't think, because on Potter, it's a very insular world to film, so that you just basically, you go into work every day. There's a big perimeter fence around the studios. We are the only film at Leavesden, so normally you'd have interaction between different crews and things. Because
it feels very safe, doesn't it? I always felt that when I visited. It felt like family. Very safe. Everyone knew everyone else's names.
And that's got even stronger since then, I'd have to say, as well, as it's actually, the relationships I have with some people around that set are like family, But what was lovely for us was that, from my point of view, and I speak for I think most of the set, in terms of your involvement, you were around a lot at the beginning and early on, and very, very involved. And then as you kind of saw that we weren't going massively off script, you kind of
completely right.
back,
completely right. Early on. But
was that hard or?
No, it was easy.
Okay.
And it was a relief.
Right.
I was around a lot earlier on. I wanted the Great Hall to look right. I wanted Diagon Alley to look right. There were details that I saw so clearly in my mind. I knew I could help. I knew I genuinely could help, and I could help them make it right for the readers. And I felt a huge protectiveness, I suppose, and loyalty to the readership. Yeah. Once I knew you were up and running, and it was fine. It was a relief to say, right, there are the films, and I'm over here with the books, and that's fine. And I trust these people, and I did, and I do.
And that's wonderful.
And, I think, and I have to say that it was, inevitably, you had to depart from the strict storyline of the books. The books are simply too long to make into very faithful films. And I can think of many places where it's worked just beautifully. And some things are just more filmic, and some things are more inherently novelistic. So I was always accepting of that. It didn't have to be a word-for-word transcription of my world, although some fans are that.
Yes,
scary.
I mean, I do think
I'm not that scary.
that they kind of, no, you're not, which is wonderful. But I do sometimes think that, if we did make a 6-hour Harry Potter film, there would be
an audience for it.
There would be an audience,
and they would still be complaining that there were things that were wrong, and they would want the director's cut.
Yeah.
So let's not even go down that route.
So, is there anything, talking about things, being cut out and things, is there anything that we've cut that you were a couple of things maybe that you were upset about that you thought could have been in, and is there anything that we put in that maybe weren't in the books that you thought, because I always remember I remember something about Alfonso and the Dementors.
No, I was fine. I remember exactly what it was with Alfonso. Yeah. There was first of all, on the Dementor point, I thought he did those beautifully, and I loved the fact that they really created that visceral dislike I loved what he did with the Dementors.
Cool.
What it was there was something in the script that Alfonso really wanted to get music into the film.
Right.
And he put the choir in, which I loved.
Yes.
But at one point, he had this rather bizarre scene where I think Flitwick was conducting, and there was this, there were miniature people in an orchestra inside something. And you see, this is my geekiness. I said to him, but why? I know it's visually exciting, but part of what I think fans really enjoyed about the literary world was there was a logic that underpinned it. There was always a logic to the magic, however strange it became. And I know it's intriguing to go through the mouth of whatever it was and see these little people, but why have they done it?
Yes.
For you to film it. That's just what it feels like.
Yeah,
you know, normally
yeah.
with the magic, there's a point. So we had a bit of a discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes I would dig my heels in on the funniest things. I'd be saying, change the costume, that's no problem. Yeah, I don't mind if that happens in that city instead of that city. And then all of a sudden I'd say, but they wouldn't do that spell. Why would they do that there?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes I confuse people.
Because the things I get wound up by around set are mispronunciations. Because I don't know if they wind you up as well, but can we get a definitive pronunciation of Aurora? Is it?
That's clearly what you think it is.
Aura. It is Aura. See, here's the thing: is that I always read it Aurora, and then it got.
But you can. I mean, with loads of my words.
But the one you really hate, by the way, is a lot of people on set, even people in.
People who should know
better say Expelliarmus instead of Expelliarmus.
Expelliarmus.
Yeah, and it does make it sound like a bowlerama.
Yeah,
or something
it does.
like that.
That's not good at all. No, that's really bad. That's very bad. I
do tell people off.
Good.
Yeah, because I got a question the other day because we did this thing recently, which was a thing where we connected over the internet and did an audio commentary for the film on the internet, and people sent in questions at the same time. It was really cool. And one question somebody typed in where it was, I noticed that most of the spells in the film have a blue hue to them. Why is this? And I sort of just, I don't know, it's either prettiest or cheapest.
Exactly.
There's not a reason for everything, unfortunately.
Funnily enough, talking about colour, which does tie right back into the beginning when you were cast, I remember David Heyman calling me up and saying, we've tried green contact lenses. We can digitally alter his eye colour post-production. How important is it that his eyes are green?
That I will, thank you for.
And I said, the only really important thing is that his eyes look like his mother's eyes. So if you're casting Lily, there needs to be a resemblance, but they don't absolutely have to be green. Oh, thank Christ, he said. Because, were the contact lenses awful?
The contact lenses, there is a very small percentage of people apparently who have a very
extreme
reaction to contact lenses. And I was one of them.
I feel really bad.
No, don't worry. It's 10 years ago. It's really fine.
Are you over it?
Yeah, I'm over it now.
Sorry.
But there was, because also the other thing that we didn't think was a particularly good sign early on was that the green eyes went down so badly. But then after I came up in these terrible spots after about a week. And I, then in my teen years did get bad acne, but I was 11 at the time.
You never looked like you had bad acne.
Was
that great makeup?
That was great makeup and some visual effects.
I've been walking around for years saying it's incredible none of them ever even got spots.
You're joking? No.
I promise you, I kept saying, how unlikely is that we managed to cast 3 kids who go through adolescence on screen, they always have perfect skin.
I think Rupert was the luckiest of the 3 of us. Rupert didn't have much. But me and Emma, well, particularly myself, got very, very spotty. But over that first 2 weeks, it was brilliant because we put the glasses on and eventually we realised that I was allergic to them. I was actually allergic to the Harry Potter glasses because I had these 2 rings of whiteheads and spots had come up around my eyes. And it took us about a week to realise that it was actually the glasses. But it didn't.
It's lucky neither of us believe in signs, isn't it?
Exactly. It really is lucky we don't believe in omens. But I also like that you sort of people selectively believe in omens, so that we probably just disregard that one anyway.
Exactly.
That would be coincidence.
You were meant to be.
Yeah. I remember my first day was quite scary because I looked on the call sheet and it just said me, Emma, Rupert and Robbie Coltrane. Because actually we were shooting the last scene of the film first.
You loved Robbie though.
Yes, it's wonderful.
David Heyman said to me, if there's one actor that you really want for one of the parts, and I said Robbie for Hagrid. Really? And I just kept saying it. And they talked about other people and yeah, that was a bit of a deal breaker for me. I really wanted Robbie. It's just that I always saw Robbie as being the right person.
He is wonderful.
I love the fact that Robbie turns up for the script read-throughs and everything. You know,
yes.
he's just a worker, isn't he?
While we're on the topic of the other actors, Alan Rickman,
Alan.
and my relationship with Alan since the fifth film has changed totally.
Has it?
And because on the fifth film I found him very, very intimidating.
He is scary.
And he is a scary guy.
He's just scary.
Before you sort of, and then I went and did Equus, and then we went out for dinner afterwards, and suddenly I found that Alan's actually hilarious.
He can be very, very funny.
Really funny and self-deprecating and kind of wonderful company, and who also was so supportive of me whenever I was going on stage. At one point, he cut short his holiday in I think in Canada to come back early and see the show so he could talk to me about it.
I didn't know about
Like
that.
he
That's
does,
lovely.
he's amazing. Like he does things like that, and. But how much did he know originally? Because there was always been this thing of Alan knew something.
Alan really makes me laugh. Right, it's absolutely true. I told him really early on that Snape had been in love with Lily. That's why he hated James. That's why he projected this amount of dislike onto Harry. So he knew that.
And at what point?
Then I heard you told me
Yeah.
that he'd been saying in I don't know whether it was more than one scene, but you told me that he'd said, I just don't think Snape would do that,
Yeah.
given what I know.
Yeah.
And I
do
thought,
remember
Alan,
that.
are you really milking this now? If your camera angle's not good enough. No, I really feel at this point Snape would be centre stage in The Good Life because of what I know. So then do you remember we were talking about, I said, well, let's just pretend I've told you loads of stuff. So anytime they try and make you, but you wouldn't go for it.
No, I didn't.
Very principled of you.
They were trying to get me the other day. They're all trying to get me to get a bit pissy about stuff because they want to go home early. I've still not gone into the crew pressures yet.
It was funny about sort of telling things because people used to say to me all the time, have you told the actors? Have you told the actors what
And
happens?
I don't think we wanted to know.
And you didn't want to know. And I don't think anyone really believed that. But I think partly, I know that you started winding people up and saying that I had told you stuff, but that was on set.
Yeah.
I mean, among the cast, wasn't it? And then you got more than you bargained for because then you got a taste of what it's like to be me, didn't you?
Yes, then I got everyone coming up, and it was.
So you had to back
so
off
I really
from
had to
that
kind of admit that
position.
I actually know nothing all along. It was the one night you came and saw Equus was also
Just
the
the
night
night
that somebody
they
threw an
threw
owl at a stage.
An owl onto stage. And
Stuff
you said to me,
not real.
that's the only time that's happened. I said, well, I threw it.
Yes.
Coincidence.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I couldn't resist. I remember you said. And then you said something like, "Well, I'm going to have you naked in the last book." Then, and I'd laugh. You bloody did.
And I did, but that was always, I swear on my life, I promise you, that was always planned.
When we've done that,
Yeah.
I'm not naked. I'm
Well,
in-
frankly, I'm
yeah.
disappointed
I'm sorry.
because you did it in Equus, so why can't you do it for Harry Potter?
But what we've done is a kind of
Are you
one
wearing
of my
a toweling rope?
yeah. No, we've gone for kind of that. You know, have you seen one of my favourite films? Is A Matter of Life and Death.
That's my favourite film of all time.
Oh, really?
How have we never
We
discussed
really,
that before?
really haven't planned this for anybody watching.
Is that honestly true?
Yeah, I've got three favourite films: 12 Angry Men, Matter of Life and Death, and Doctor Strangelove. But Matter of Life and Death is probably, is
Very
superseding.
good taste in films.
Thank
That's
you.
my favourite film of all time.
Well, we've done something like that so the Afterlife was sort of I'm in all in grey tones, kind of.
Oh, okay.
mix.
That's
So as
yes.
a-
Well, if it's a tribute to A Matter of Life and Death, actually, I told David Heyman years and years ago that A Matter of Life and Death was my favourite film.
But what was the other thing I was going to
No,
say?
we
Equus,
talked
no.
about.
So yeah, you came and saw
Yeah.
Equus, and afterwards, I remember I turned around to you and said,
Do I die?
Go
I've
on.
got to ask.
"Go on, do I die?" And you very cryptically sort of paused for a moment,
Said
and
you
then
get a
said,
death scene.
"You get a death scene," which was sort of.
And I saw you double take. You knew.
Yeah,
You said,
yeah. At that point, I was kind of like, okay, I sort of vaguely have some idea what's going on.
And Neil, my husband, afterwards said, "What did Dan ask you when he lent into you?" I said, "He asked if he's going to die." "What did you tell him?" I said, "I'm not telling you."
So did Neil not even know? Really? But so because I remember hearing a story at one point about, you killing off a character and becoming very upset about it. And would you not be able to talk to him about that kind of stuff?
I think I told him in advance of Dumbledore,
Okay.
but he didn't know whether Harry was going to make it. No one knew.
Really? You really were living with that weight then?
It's funny because Matthew, I remember seeing Matthew at the premiere for.
He's brilliant, isn't he?
He's
Completely. Yeah.
And there's another example. They cast what they think is this plain-looking kid,
I know,
and he grows
he's
up to be this
this
kind of rock god. We were at a script read-through, and I'm looking along, and I'm feeling all
Where's
nostalgic. Oh, there they all are, Dan and Rupert and Emma. And then there's this big guy in leathers, a bit unshaven, and I thought, he's probably the guy they've got from McLagan. And I move on, and I think, no, he's Matthew, what happened to you? So that was weird. But
and also one of the coolest, most hard-working guys on that
guy.
set. Yeah.
I met him at the premiere for Half-Blood Prince, and I said, "There's some great stuff for Neville in," and he went, "I don't want to know." All right, sorry, just trying to liven up the conversation. There you are.
But you can normally rely on me and Matt for understatement.
Yeah, it was pretty forceful.
I remember on the 5th film,
Yeah.
you came to the set and we had probably the biggest talk about the character we've ever had, even though it wasn't a major thing. But it was. Yeah. I was kind of more asking questions about the relevance of Dumbledore's army and, how important is that in terms of what will happen later. Yeah. I remember that what you said to me was it's very important because at some point Harry will have to lead large numbers of people.
Yeah, the only real resistance, the only organised resistance, really.
Yeah.
I always knew final battle would happen at Hogwarts. So that's where we were always walking towards. So along the way I had to set it up so that Harry had become a leader of some form of resistance movement because it was far too implausible. I remember that talk. I remember that talk vividly. And
on the wall in my room, I had I'd just done a big project where I'd taken pictures of lots of authors off the internet and written a little biography about them underneath, and then put their names up. And I did loads of them. I can definitely remember you picking it out.
George Eliot.
Tell about the relevance of George Eliot.
When I was looking for a maiden name for Lily, I chose Evans on the basis that it had been George Eliot's real name.
See, that's wonderful. I don't think anybody knows that, do they?
No, it's just one of those just quite random things. But sometimes, for strange reasons, you'll use a name and it always thereafter means more to you than it does to anyone else. Yeah, so I do remember that.
In the books, obviously, it's how much were your school days kind of influential on the kind of not obviously in the magic, but in the
no, not at all. I went to a comprehensive.
All right,
so
okay.
It was
cool. So all these kids you've inspired to go off to boarding schools.
Yeah, God, which was the very last thing I wanted to do. It certainly wasn't pro boarding school. It's simply logistics. There's a logic underpinning the world, and if you are a part of society who's living in secret, and you want to gather together a large number of your children and teach them potentially dangerous and explosive things that could expose the whole society, you are going to do that in an isolated place, and you probably are going to have them board there. Yeah. It was just logistics. Yeah. But of course, there is an appeal to young people, and there was to me the idea of just being together with young people and being divested of your parents. Yeah. I think that's quite appealing. Yeah. It's much more interesting to write about if you're talking about kids with kids, and the authority not being parental figures. It just allows them much more leeway. Yeah. So that's why it was. But it was no kind of a yen to recreate any sort of 1940s boarding school in the slightest. I know this for a fact, and I'm afraid people will just have to take my word on this, because after all, I have met thousands of the kids who've read these books. Children from virtually every walk of life would like to go to Hogwarts.
Oh yes, absolutely. I still would.
Well, it's an exciting place. It's spooky. It's mysterious. They get rid of their parents. They get to have feasts every day. It's in some ways a fantasy. It's a dark fantasy because there are things there that are frightening. Yeah. But you could have quite a nice life at Hogwarts as long as you kept your head down.
And weren't friends with
friends with Harry Potter, who kills everything he touches.
Moved to Midsummer. Why'd you go and live there? It's a terrible idea.
Don't be friends with Harry.
Yeah.
And just do your lessons and stay in your common room.
Yeah.
And until, obviously, Voldemort comes knocking at the gates, you probably have quite a nice life.
Right. It's like when at the moment you see anybody in any war film, so a picture of their girlfriend back home, you just, why have you done that?
No, exactly,
You're
of course.
Killed now.
Exactly.
Because in a way, because what I like about Harry as a character is that one of the things that sort of marks him is that so many of his relationships and so many of his most important moments in his life have been to do with death. And, for instance, his relationship with Cho Chang.
He's Typhoid Mary. Everyone who enters a room with Harry is going to cark it at some point.
Exactly. I mean, you don't hang out with him.
Well, exactly. It talk about an aura of doom. Yes, and that, of course, that was quite deliberate, and he's
because
the prism through which I view death in all its many forms.
Wow.
Of course, yes.
As the books went on, and you realised that actually suddenly it was getting a massive adult fan base as well. Did you then realise you could gear it more towards adults in showing that kind of stuff, or were you always going to confront kids kind of with that?
No, I always... Anyway? Well, it's a very good question, because clearly I never went into it expecting to pick up an adult fan base the way that I did. Having said that, I had said from the very first, I said to my first editor, Barry Cunningham, I want them to grow up and it will get darker and it will get scarier. And I think you can see that happening right up till 4. I mean, obviously, after 4, things get very scary, but I always knew they would because Voldemort's come back.
Yeah.
So some very nasty stuff happens. So I really went where my pen took me, and bad though it may sound to some people, I never really considered my readership in that way. I never sat down and thought, I just wrote what I wanted to write.
Yeah.
And things got darker and darker and darker, as you know, and
So be it.
yeah.
Because, okay, so coming on to Potter, how much then
Yes.
did you know from the beginning? Because there's it's almost become part of the legend of Harry Potter,
Yeah.
that you knew all of it, and that and as these things do, they get out of hand. So the last chapter went from being written to being written and being in a safe with an armed guard.
Always rubbish.
Yeah,
always,
right.
always rubbish. It was never, nothing was ever locked away in that.
And did you feel that at all, or?
Well, there was a degree of truth. I had very early on, but not the first day or anything, probably within the first year of writing, I wrote a sketch for what I thought the final chapter would be. So that's true. But it did change.
Okay.
Because at least one character was alive in that version of the character that subsequently I killed. So, there were a couple of people.
Can we hear who?
Lupin was supposed to make it, and of course
really?
he didn't.
No.
Yeah.
Lupin's one of my saddest ones, I have to say.
Me too.
That was pretty
Me
awful.
too. I hated killing them,
Yeah.
but they had to go. You've got the chip of ice in the heart of the writer, as Graham Greene
Jesus.
says.
Well, now, here's another thing, because was there ever a chance that one of the main... Because I was convinced that one of the main 3 had to buy it, eventually. One of them was
Funnily enough, I planned from the start that none of them would die. Okay. Then, midway through, which I think is a reflection of the fact that I wasn't in a very happy place, I started thinking I might polish one of them off. Out of sheer spite. There, now you definitely can't have him anymore.
Midway through the book or midway through the series?
Midway through the series,
right.
Yeah. But I think in my absolute heart of hearts, although I did seriously consider killing Ron.
Really?
Anyway, I can tell you exactly. It's a real relief to be able to talk about it all. It's fantastic.
It must be lovely,
It's
actually.
lovely. The truth is, I always knew, and this is from really early on, that I was working towards the point where Hagrid carried Harry, alive but supposedly dead, out of the forest. Always. I knew where we were always working towards a final battle at Hogwarts. I knew that Harry would walk to his death. I planned the ghosts, for want of a better word, coming back, that they would walk with him into the forest. We would all believe he was walking to his death, and he would emerge in Hagrid's arms. So that's what always kept Hagrid safe, because Hagrid actually would have been a natural to kill in some ways, but because I always cleaved to this mental image of Hagrid being the one carrying Harry out, and that was so perfect for me, because it was Hagrid who came and took him into the world, and then Hagrid who would bring him back. And the onlookers would believe he was dead, and just physically, Hagrid being so big and fatherly, and Harry being limp in his arms. So that's where we were always going.
That's amazing. It's interesting that something like that image actually kept Hagrid safe. I like that phrase. It almost
that's
protected
exactly
him.
Hagrid was never in danger. And as I say, Lupin, when I first created Lupin, I had no intention of killing him, and then it was sort of borne in upon me that Lupin had to die, which is awful.
Yeah, I mean that's a horrible
I knew he
realization.
had to go, and the reason he had to go was, what if ultimately, I mean, in the final book, you're looking at a war, aren't you? And what's horrific about war? Well, one of the horrific things is leaving children fatherless, motherless, and so on. And I just came to a point where I thought, I'm going to have to show that again, and the most powerful way of showing that is to kill parents that we know and to leave another baby boy is orphaned. It happens in the first war, and Harry was that boy, and now it happens again. But I gave him Harry as a godfather, and you hear about him in the epilogue, and you know that he's all right in as much as he can be.
Who was your favourite character to write for? To write dialogue for?
Dumbledore. Oh well, I loved writing for Ron. Yeah. I loved writing dialogue. I miss Dumbledore the most, because he came from I always feel like he came from somewhere back here. It felt quite automatic writing when I wrote Dumbledore. He was telling me things I needed to hear sometimes.
Oh, really?
I really liked that, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I miss him.
And what is the because I remember because Albus was presumably because of the beard, was it?
Well, no, actually, Albus and Rubeus, the red and the white, if you read about alchemy,
Okay.
then the red and the white are highly significant. And so I had put Albus with its connotation of purity and Rubeus with its more passionate connotation, these two halves, and Hagrid being devoted to Dumbledore, of course, always, but he's a much rougher character. So they were almost two halves of an ideal father when Harry first, because Harry, of course, is a boy throughout the books in search of a father, isn't he?
Yes. You know, to people watching this, there is a very cynical way to watch this. The way we're talking about these characters as if they are real people. And people, I think, just need to understand that for you, it's been pretty much 20 years with these characters at this point.
Yeah, 20 years,
You know, and for me, 10. So you do get not just attached to the actors who I play with, but the notion of them as the principles of those characters.
And a very ongoing relationship with them and thinking about them as though they're real people. And just living with them, they're in your life. They're in your life the way real people are.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask about, I do feel I have some duty on a personal level as well, because I've always had my own suspicions about this. Dumbledore being gay.
I thought you were going to ask something completely. Yeah, go on.
Dumbledore being gay.
Yeah. Well,
was that something that was just thrown out for the American press to get them stirred up a bit? No.
No, it did.
No, it did, which is obviously was very funny. But
but I found people's reaction to that really interesting, and I'll tell you why. By the time that I said that, I had been working on these characters for 17 years. Now, not many writers have ever been with the same set of characters for that long. No. So I feel I can sort of speak for all of us who have to say it becomes a very intense experience, and inevitably you are going to know things about characters, and I'm characters in the plural, that are not, in some cases will be relevant, and you'll think, oh yeah, this is the moment that becomes relevant, and I will say that or show that. Right. For example, Professor McGonagall, I had a whole history worked out for her that I thought at some point would become relevant, that she'd had a love affair with a muggle and that she'd had this quite tortured past and she ended up being this celibate elderly teacher. Never became relevant, never happened. And as time went on and I got to know Dumbledore, but this is before the publication of Philosopher's Stone, so bear in mind, at this point, I've been with him for 7 years. I knew he was gay. I just knew he was gay.
Okay.
And to me, it was not a big deal. This is a very old man who has a very terrible job to do. And his gayness is not really...
Part of it.
It's not really relevant. Very relevant to him as a character, because I always saw him as a very lonely character. And I think that there is, in fact, a hint of it in 7, because the relationship he has with Grindelwald, he fell very hard for this boy. He's awfully trusting of this good-looking young man when he shows up. Don't you think it was perfect that Dumbledore, who is always the great champion of love, Harry, love will save us, love, his one great experience of love was utterly tragic. Yeah. It was with someone who was dangerous and demonic. Yeah. And so, you know, and created absolute havoc in the world and created havoc for him. So that was my idea of Dumbledore's tragic backstory. Yeah. Now, I liked leaving it open so that perhaps a more worldly reader would see that there was, that may have been in that relationship. Yeah. And perhaps a 9-year-old would think he made a great friend and he trusted him. I enjoy the fact that I used to say, because I can remember journalists asking me about it in the early days and saying, well, you know, do you not think this is a bit too over their heads? And I said, listen, if they reread the book, it's like going back and finding another sweet in the bag, isn't it? Yeah. You reread 2 years later and you think, oh, God, I get that now, that innuendo. Or,
exactly.
Do you know? So I was okay with that.
Through all the books.
But in the context of how I was writing about him, in other words, he's giving... Oh, clearly, he's John the Baptist to Harry's Christ, isn't he? He's the nearly ran man, the man who nearly could have had the Hallows, but he was too power hungry. That was what was interesting to me about Dumbledore. So he's used in the book, clearly, he's the fount of all worldly wisdom, and he teaches Harry what he needs to teach Harry because he recognises that Harry is going to be the one, or Galahad to Lancelot, or whatever you like.
No, I like John the Baptist.
He's the more flawed one. He was the nearly ran. Yeah. That to me was what was interesting about Dumbledore.
How did the reaction strike you?
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, I thought first of there were two strands of the reaction that interested me, not in a particularly good way, if you like. Right. The first was, why is it such a big deal to you? Yeah. You know, which is the most why is it a big deal? What do you assume gayness looks like that you're saying to me, why didn't we know?
You couldn't have written a feather boa, could you?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
that's
the
how
assumption.
crass it becomes. What do you think gayness looks like in an old man?
Exactly.
Why would it make him behave any differently to how he behaves through the books? What is your problem with that?
That's very strange.
But I told my second editor, so she was with me from Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah.
We were chatting about something quite unconnected with Dumbledore, but I ended up saying to her, well, Dumbledore, for example, he's gay. And she said, is he? And I said, yeah, I think so. I think he's gay. And then funnily enough, in a read through you were at, Steve, do you remember in the first draft of the script for Half-Blood Prince,
right?
When Harry's at the station and Dumbledore comes to meet him at the station, and in an early draft of that script, Dumbledore said to Harry, he said, I remember a young woman with eyes of flashing whatever, raven-haired. And I read this, and I scribbled on my copy of the script, Steve, Dumbledore is gay. Shoved it up the table. And Steve, oh. So that's why that line didn't make the film.
Okay.
So it had always been there, and I told people about it, but this piece of information about the character came to light finally because someone put up their hand and asked, had Dumbledore ever been married? Which I'd never been asked at a reading before, ever.
Wow.
And that's how it happened. And
what was the kind of audience in the reading? What kind of who were they?
It was a huge reading at the Radio City Hall in New York.
God.
Massive. It was absolutely massive. And
It's like 7,000 people or something.
yeah,
isn't
more.
it?
I think it was huge. And someone said this, and I said, well, no. In fact, I always saw Dumbledore as gay. Bang. And that's how it happened. But one guy came out to his friends that night.
See,
He came down because I did a massive
That's amazing.
signing, and halfway down the queue, there's this guy standing in front of me saying, I just came out! And I said, congratulations! And we hugged. Oh my God, Dumbledore, oh my God! And then off he went, and I was thrilled.
That's amazing. It's interesting, actually, if you start to think for a moment, not about these characters being characters, but if you think about the characters, the lives these characters actually have within the books, and the fact that to a certain level, because they exist in the collective consciousness of a generation, they do exist. Because I always think that's one of the wonderful things about Potter and the Potter fan base, is that whereas if you think about the other big costume wearing and all that kind of stuff that goes with it, is things like Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what's interesting is that Potter, because it started off as a literary thing, has kind of created a generation of the same kind of mentality of geeky thoroughness, but with an appetite for reading and literature, which is kind of amazing.
It was wonderful, isn't it? It was just the most wonderful thing. And at the last premiere, because obviously I'm not meeting readers in vast numbers at the moment, because I'm, I finished the books. And so to meet them again through the films is really great. I can't deny that. It's lovely. It's really lovely.
Before the books even got picked up, until, sitting in this hotel room,
Yes.
what are some of the surreal, kind of bizarre, where do you start, I suppose? But 'cause for me, the last premiere was mental.
It was mental, wasn't it?
When
mental.
it was pouring with rain.
And it felt more extreme than any of them had.
Yeah.
I think that I was in a place of false security, in that I felt that the books are finished. So the excitement will really drop.
Fool.
Yeah, was I ever? Because I got out and it was like aircraft engine noise, wasn't it? It was scary. Were there more people there?
It felt like it, because there's this one moment where I looked out over one side and there was just these hundreds, this sort of tumult of people just surging forward, like sort of, and all drenched.
Yeah.
And if there'd ever been a moment when I could have absolutely just formed a dictatorship,
Exactly right.
I could have just said, we'll march on the palace, and they all would have joined me at that
scary
moment.
having that feeling. I've had that feeling. In fact, the reading that I did to sort of launch Phoenix, which was at the Albert Hall. Was it at the Albert Hall? I think it was at the Albert Hall. And they had all these graphics behind me. It was like Nuremberg. It was insane. I'm looking up thinking, who designed this? But yeah, you get these moments where you think, right, Harry Potter fans, let us march.
Absolutely.
You think some of them would.
Oh, they would,
It's
absolutely.
lucky I don't have any of those. I don't have dictatorial impulses now.
But no, the only thing you can do
Yeah.
is laugh at it, and it's
Yeah,
hilarious,
so
and it's so funny. It's bizarre. When somebody, tries to for instance, that we were, when somebody once tried to jump into the front seat of the car with us, does somebody try to follow us in afterwards? You've got two reactions to that situation. You can either be terrified and think, oh, people are going to try and get into my car, or you can think, that's hilarious that she tried to do that. I'm fine now that I'm safe and it's all fine, and that's quite funny. But no, those first.
I don't want people to jump in your car. So yeah, that makes me uptight.
Okay, sorry. See, this is the thing: is I always get a lot less annoyed by it than whoever I'm out with.
Yeah, but that's also true of me. When spooky things have happened to me, it's much easier when you're the target, I think, to think, it happened, that's fine. Whereas people around you are completely freaked out and saying, you mustn't ever be alone in a car again.
Yeah, exactly.
But did you? Because you've been subject to sort of internet rumours and stuff, the crazy stuff that comes with it. Does that make you laugh?
I've got a kind of top, at least a top 4, I think, of these.
Oh, tell me.
Stories that I've heard about myself.
Go on.
Was that I was getting SAS guards to walk my dogs.
Well, it's best, Dan. Really, let me advocate that.
That I was getting.
How many dogs have you got?
2.
You have actually got dogs?
Yeah, my mum and dad.
Because it wouldn't surprise me if there were no dogs.
No,
either.
exactly. No. God, my dogs are quite famous.
Are they? Oh,
my
God,
dogs,
sorry,
my dogs get as many presents as I do.
No idea. I've clearly been out for loop too.
No. I mean, they're not featured, but they're just people know their names on the internet, and
okay.
because I mentioned them once in an interview. And
so SAS dog walkers.
So SAS dog walkers. I was having for a while. I was having special beer brewed in a monastery in Belgium by Belgian monks.
Just for me.
I don't drink beer.
You had your own personal monks.
I don't. Yeah.
And SAS dog walkers.
And SAS dog walkers. I don't particularly like it. There was one that I'd grown, I think, about 8 inches in about 6 weeks or something.
That would be extremely worrying.
Which, as anybody who meets me can tell, that's not happened. And the one of my favourite ones was the rumour that I was going to be having a statue made of myself for my living room.
Solid gold, I hope.
I think they obviously think I live sort of like some Roman emperor, like Caligula, just building statues to myself everywhere around, dotting them around the studio. Just as a
Rupert might have himself made in chocolate.
Yeah, he could do
something like that.
Absolutely, he might just have himself encased in it and eat his way out. That's what. Actually, that would be quite a good. I quite enjoy doing that. I will just give you a quick list of what is the Grint menagerie at the moment. In terms of cars, I think he's just sold.
Has he got the ice cream van still?
He's still got the ice cream van.
Oh, really?
He's got
I love to think of him in an ice cream van.
Got a hovercraft now as well. Hovercraft. And we had a bright orange Range Rover with blacked out windows. And he said, I'm selling it. And I said, why? He said, that's the colour. Which is presumably why I bought it in the first place. But he's now got like amazing pets, and he's got like llamas and peacocks, and he basically has done, with his money, what the rest of us would have done with our money what we said we'd all do when we were 7, and just have the kind of Willy Wonka house.
I'm really happy. I'm really pleased about that.
We always make jokes about Rupert because we always
he's
think
living the dream.
He is living the dream, and we always say he gets out of bed, just into the water flume, down to the breakfast table. That's how he sort of travels around his house. But as we were saying before, one of my favourite moments, right, in a bizarre way, because you know how when you sort of offend some people, you must be doing something right. Well, there was one of my favourite photos from Potter was, I think it made the cover of like the Times or some, big proper newspaper, and it was a huge bonfire in some state in America, I think, and it was somebody had thrown a calendar, and through the air, smiling, was Rupert Grint's face being tossed into the flames, and it was one of the abiding images that I've always remembered.
It's that much funnier that it was Rupert.
Yeah, isn't it? Exactly. Yeah, just that it was quite serene, kind of going into the fire, and it was lovely. But does that bother you, or do you think that's actually a good sign?
No, it's never bothered me because I felt that those particular criticisms were utterly misguided. Yeah. I have no track at all with those kind of views. So if they want to burn my books, feel free.
Yeah, fine. Presumably they're going to have to buy copies to burn them. So,
well, even that didn't particularly bother me. I have occasionally come face to face with people like that.
Really,
they can be quite aggressive.
Really,
I remember on one of my book tours we had plainclothes police checking the place out for bombs because there had been a bomb threat. Yeah, so it was real. And I look back on that, and I mean, that's largely died down, but there's certainly states in America where I don't think I'd be particularly welcome.
No.
It is what it is, you know.
So I even remember when I was 11, I was at like a party, just like
Oh no,
my
don't
neighbour's
tell me
party.
someone went for you.
Didn't go for me, but somebody, like the mother of somebody who lived in our street, you know, was saying, "Oh, I'm not sure if kids will be able to tell the difference between black magic and it's magic. So what's the issue? It's a book."
You know, I have a real issue with anyone trying to protect children from their own imaginations, and I think that a lot of this goes on. And if we cannot acknowledge and embrace the fact that we all have a certain degree of darkness within us, some more than others perhaps, and, you know, bring it into the light and examine it and talk about it, this part of the human condition, then I think we will be living in quite a dangerous climate. And I think that's much more damaging for children.
Absolutely.
You know, I think truth and openness are the,
the
way
moment
to go.
something can't be talked about is
exactly,
the moment it becomes a danger.
Yeah. But sometimes it made me sad. I remember I went back to my old primary school, and that a child had been excluded from the reading. He was sitting alone because his parents didn't want him subjected to my evil influence, and that made me feel really sad.
Yeah.
Mostly it didn't. Mostly it made me feel quite bullish and
belligerent.
Yeah. If I'm honest, yes, it did. I just thought it's nonsense, and I'm certainly not going to apologise or justify myself.
That's the other thing I was going to talk about was the fame side of things. So obviously, we are two people who have, you know, done very well out of Harry Potter. I mean, I've done well out of it. You've done well because you created it. But and so, you know, we're not going to sit here and be two moany people. We're both in kind of
absolutely.
You know, the opportunities this has afforded me. Because people in interviews, a commonly asked question I get is people say, "Do you think it's going to hold you back from, you know, doing other projects and things like that?" And actually, the chances are I never would have become an actor if I hadn't got this opportunity.
So great to hear. You know, I mean, you have said that to me before off camera, but from my point, that's the best thing I could hear. You know, that you feel that it's been a springboard rather than it's been a straitjacket, as people would have.
Never would have got the chance to do Equus or My Boy Jack or any of the other stuff, and anything like. And that's the thing I think that anybody whose career was born out of Potter has to remember for the rest of their lives, that we were all involved.
The rest of their life, they owe me big.
No, I think so. I completely agree.
No, I don't feel that way.
I know you don't.
Let me just say that now before that quote is taken out of context and used to beat me for the rest of my life. Exactly. But
but I mean, I think we do certainly owe a debt of gratitude, because I think no matter what we do for the rest of our lives, the chances are they are things where the opportunities we never would have had in the first place if we hadn't got Potter. And we were involved in this extraordinary thing for 10 years of filming that was kind of unlike anything else that's ever been done, just in terms of the amount of people that are there and the continuity of everybody being there the whole time.
I mean, are you thinking about how you're going to feel when it ends? Because it's been so stable, hasn't it? Always filming in the same place, always the same people, which was wonderful.
Which is wonderful, but equally...
Does it feel strange that you know it's coming, or do you not really focus on that?
Just recently, we've all started thinking about it more. Because, you know what, it was the moment was actually, I was... talking to Amanda Knight and Lisa Tomlin, who do hair and makeup on Potter. Amanda's done my makeup every day for 10 years and is an amazing makeup artist.
Do you remember that day I came to visit the set and she painted, you know, you looked really beaten up. And I walked in, you and Rupert, and I walked into the room and said, "What's happened to you?" And you said, "Well, if you don't know."
Yeah.
It's pretend.
Oh, God, yes, I was already giving you drip at that stage. I was like, excellent. But I was talking to them the other day, and they were talking about another job that they might have lined up afterwards. Yeah. And it was the first moment of actually, it wasn't sadness, and it was jealousy. I was jealous that another actor was going to get those two, because Lisa's done my hair on the 6th and 7th film, but also she was on the 2nd and she's been in and out. And someone I've come to know very, very well as well. And so the fact that another actor's going to get them, I can imagine, is really is something, it's very peculiar. And I mean, it's going to be odd also because, you know, I've worked in a way with the crew on Potter in such a way that I actually feel much closer to the crew than I do to a lot of the cast.
No, I really understand that. I think a lot of people who, and it certainly includes me before I became involved with these films, but people wouldn't maybe understand just how important the crew are. They're every day in, day out, they're the people you're seeing and working with and joking with, and I've come to understand that too.
Because I've kind of worked out recently, particularly on this film, that success on a film set kind of relies upon the ability to concentrate very intensely for very short spaces of time.
Yeah, it's the exact reverse of writing. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And then you have to learn to switch off in the moments that you can, because you can't keep yourself at that level of energy all day, although I am quite hyper. You know, my mum and dad have often said to me they did get lucky when they got somebody with the kind of boundless energy that
you do have, and you always have had.
Yeah.
It's always been so apparent. Even when you were quite small, it was like you were 4 espressos ahead of everyone else. It was good.
Yeah,
it was
I
great.
think, which is why I don't drink coffee.
Yeah, it does.
Because
I
you
think
can't imagine me after that.
Yeah.
No, because I remember the first day we met, I think, was when you came in and all the kids were there.
That's right, yeah.
I think, and you know, Tom
Yes.
Felton had his
Tom
Diablo
Felton had
thing.
his Diablo because he was, he showed my child, then very young, how to use it. And I was always I always had a real soft spot for Tom after that. Brilliant. And it was so ironic that we have this arch baddie, and he's about the nicest. I mean, we keep saying everyone's nice, but the fact is they are. There were never any brats. There was never anyone objectionable. They were all just really nice people. But Tom's such a sweetheart.
He's a bit older than the rest of us as well, and was when he was younger, and had done a bit more work. Yeah. Like he'd done quite a few films.
Yeah. And in his demeanour off set, that showed, I think. He was quite comfortable with being there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, he was so sweet. I do remember that day, all of you in the canteen looking around. It was spooky.
It is amazing.
I remember Devon, who plays Seamus, very vividly from that day. Because he really looks like I imagined.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was one of the ones they'd really cast someone who
I think
the way I'd imagined.
The other person we should definitely talk about, because who I do think is sort of, even though you notice what he does, he is the unsung hero of these films, Stuart Craig.
Oh, God.
Because his sets are...
He's a genius.
I mean, for me, that's what makes the world.
He's just a genius, yes. Yeah.
Because it's the detail of everything. Because I think that's what has allowed us to survive as a successful franchise. Because we sort of have, because we started off at the same time as a whole host of other kids' fantasy films have sort of started. But the reason I think we've managed to do so well and sustain the story right to the end and keep people interested is largely down to, I think, the sets and the fact that the detail that goes into the world is so thorough, it feels complete.
World. And I again, as someone who's not, been involved in the film business and came to it entirely new, to be able to walk into the Gryffindor common room and pick up the comics and read them, it's so real, it's so fabulous. Kids who visit the set are blown away by it, aren't they? That they can walk into all of these rooms and play with all these things.
Unfortunately, we've now lost the Gryffindor common room.
Is it gone?
I don't know.
It was my favourite set.
I don't know where it is anymore. I think maybe it's probably. I don't think it's because it was everyone's favourite set. So I think it's probably been moved.
Better not have been set up in someone's back garden.
Oh no, I'm sure that's not the case. But I'm sure
you did tell me everyone's going around putting dibs on various props.
Yeah, well, I'm really eyeing up my glasses. That's what I want. And I don't want.
It's not what you want. You see, I think I would want my wand.
See, the thing is, the wand for me is a less constant thing. Because it changed after the second film. It's a different wand I've got now.
Oh, okay.
And because in Alfonso's words, he said that he thought the other wand looked too smooth and like it was from IKEA. And so he gave me this sort of stick, and which was great. But all the chopping and changing with wands in the last book. I can explain it to you, Dan. Can you please? We are so struggling on this set. I have to say, I will get my wand again. And who's this?
Who's this
Draco's
again?
mum's.
Who does this really belong to?
It's because we got and then trying to explain it then to Rafe when Rafe comes on as Voldemort, and I'm kind of looking at him in his Voldemort makeup, and he's asking me about the ones that I'm completely panicking, going, I've really got to find the most succinct way I can explain this to you in 2 minutes, but I don't know if that's possible. Because I remember I had to reread the end of 7 a few times. I was talking about the end of 7, the epilogue.
The epilogue changed
because some people really, I like the epilogue, but some people had a problem with it.
Some people hate it.
Yeah.
A version of it was literally written 17 years previously to the book. A version of it was written. But as I said to you earlier, some people were in there who didn't turn up in the final cut and so on. Yes, I wanted to give a snapshot. I think what a lot of people felt about the tone of the epilogue was, so this is it, so it's over, so he's not a hero anymore, he's a sort of middle-aged man seeing his... It felt like a letdown, but I have said this before, for me, absolute heroism is rebuilding after that kind of trauma. Yeah. And I could think of nothing more noble than that he's he's acting what Dumbledore preached but didn't live. You see, Dumbledore preached, these are the values that see us through, that survive, love, and those sort of human bonds. Harry's actually living it. So he was always the guy to me who had it thrust upon him. And that was supposed to be epitomised, to go back to the wands, in the fact that he had the chance to have his finger on the nuclear button, as it were. He had the chance to own this most powerful one. And he said, no, want that one, want that one. I want my own, and I want to break the chain.
And going back to, what was the moment like when you, I mean, how solid is the end of writing a book? I mean, do you give it in and then it's done, or?
Well, actually, this time it felt really solid. I mean, I had editing to go through, but it was after it was published that it really hit me. Now, I had been prepared. It's an awful thing to say, but in some senses, it was like knowing someone is going to die. Yeah. I had a long time to prepare. I always said 7 books, that's it. That's what I planned from the beginning. But even so, it hit me like a train. On my birthday, which was the same month as publication, which is also Harry's birthday, which I wasn't particularly thinking about, but I cried as I've not cried since my mother died. Oh, really? Honestly, yeah, it really hit me. And I mean, my husband was, why? What's wrong? What's wrong? You know, and I said, I just can't go there anymore. I can't go there anymore. And it had been a place I could escape to for 17 years. And I knew the door had closed. Oh. And it was, but it was very cathartic. Yeah. And after that day was past, I became much lighter, and there were aspects, of it that are liberating. Obviously, I feel I've done that job, and that's always a good feeling. Well. Oh, thank you, Dan. That's done. But yeah, it was tough. It was tough. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. I cared so much about the characters. I loved writing the books. Most of the time, I loved writing the books.
Yes.
But you tell me how you're feeling about the end of it, because
no, I mean, there's
I feel like a therapist.
It's going to be very strange and very upsetting, but it's the little things that you'll miss most. Like, I mean, and also it's the fact that I mean, I'll walk into that studio for one day over the next few months and sit down in front of that makeup mirror, and it'll be the last time that I film that day, because then I'm going off and hopefully doing other things. And as you say, it will be liberating, because I'll no longer have to, when I get sent an amazing script, go, I'm sorry, I'm not available for the next 7 years. I mean, or whatever. But. So I'm very excited about the opportunity to just live that sort of actor's life of just getting a job and going off and doing it, and and those kind of things. I'm very excited about, but it's also, there's an awareness that it'll never be the same again. That I'll never have that period of time. And also, it's not just. I mean, I look at this more, in terms of a landmark, more than my 18th birthday was. This is me becoming an adult now. That is me leaving the nest now. But no, it's been a good 10 years for me. So thank you very much.
Oh, Dan, that's good to hear.
Cool.
Good one.
Cheers, Dan.